All right, Labor Day has passed. Most investors are moving back into the market from their summer vacations. But what will September overall have in store for investors? Joining me now to talk about that, David Stefferson, Senior Portfolio Manager at Hardesty Capital Management, and Peter Schiff, President of Euro Pacific Capital and author of Crash Proof: How to Profit from the Coming Economic Collapse. Robin Farzad joins in the discussion as well. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for joining us. Peter, I'll start with you. How to profit from the coming financial collapse. So you really think we're headed for a prolonged retraction? Oh,
absolutely. 100%. You know, you talk about uncertainty. I am 100% certain that we're headed for a severe and prolonged recession, and most U.S. stocks are going to lose a lot of value.
Why?
Well, I mean, we've had this artificial, phony economy, particularly since the bursting of the NASDAQ bubble. It's been completely dependent on excess consumer spending. That's all been a function of cheap credit coming in from abroad, artificially inflated home prices, and low mortgage payments. All those props are going away. You know, foreigners aren't going to be loaning us any money anymore. The party is over.
All right. You know, David, that's a pretty dire prediction. I know you're not in that particular camp, so take the bull case for me.
Well, I think that the market is going to move on earnings. It's going to move on fundamentals. And if you look at the earnings momentum, it remains positive, although earnings growth is slowing. The revisions are cranking up. As a matter of fact, the S&P 500 consensus view at the beginning of the year was for a 5% earnings growth expectation, and now we're up to 7%, and we expect that to be somewhere between 8 and 9% before the end of the year. So earnings will be a positive catalyst for the market for sure.
Okay, Robin, go ahead.
You know, Sue, this market here in the U.S., about the most unoriginal thing you can say on CNBC is it's time for large cap growth to ride again. Large cap, you know, the U.S. market has not been great shakes for this decade, and this decade, believe it or not, is almost up. You know, there's a lot of cash out there on balance sheets. A lot of it's just withering at the vine. Every January 1, you have guests come on and say, this is going to be the year of the large cap. But the contrarian in me likes the fact that investor sentiment has been underwhelming, that there's a lot of cash accumulating on these balance sheets, and they're largely unloved and neglected. So at least it paves the way for some sort of return of animal spirits to the market. But we have to get past this credit crunch in the meantime.
Look, you know, Peter, what about that? I mean, would you advocate a move into large caps because of the international exposure that many of them have?
Well, you know, as a second choice, if you're not going to invest directly in foreign companies, if you're going to be forced to invest in the United States, you should at least invest in those companies that are earning their income abroad. You know, exporters, commodity-based companies. But, you know, I agree the fundamentals are important. It's just that the fundamentals are awful. Earnings are important, but earnings are going to evaporate, particularly for the financials or anybody dependent on American consumers going out and spending, because that's not going to happen. All Americans are going to be doing for the next decade is trying to pay back all the money they've already borrowed, trying to make higher payments on their adjustable rate mortgages, trying to cope with the rising cost of food and the rising cost of energy. They're not going to have any extra money to feed into corporate earnings in the United States.
Yeah, David, you know, we've seen a lot of Main Street weather this particular contraction that appears right now anyway on the paper side of things to be pretty much confined to Wall Street, with the exception, of course, of those who got into the wrong kinds of mortgages.
Right. Well, I think that the dire prediction for the consumer that your other guest is supporting, I think is a little bit too far askew. I don't think there isn't any evidence yet to suggest, although the consumer is spending a little less.
Remember, that's exactly, though, what people told me when I made my dire predictions on this network for the mortgage market and housing. And, of course, those predictions have come true as well. You know, it takes time. You know, it's going to take time for American consumers to realize their house is worth half what they paid for it. It's going to take time for all these mortgages to reset. It's going to take time for people to lose their jobs. But it's all going to happen.
Can I say that there's one wild card variable here? All right, so not only is the bloom off the real estate rose, but the rose is dead and decaying. People want to believe in something. They want the baton of leadership to be passed on to something. So real estate had it for this decade. They're just not going to sit around and keep their money in the National Bank of Sealy, as Jim Cramer calls it. You need
what money, though?
To work, and there has to be a redoubt. There has to be, at some point, the money's got to cycle into something.
No, the real estate wealth isn't going to cycle anywhere. It's going to evaporate. It never really existed. It was phony, just like all those profits in the dot-coms.
Money market accounts, there's still lots of cash on the sidelines.
People are saving in 401ks.
We have a negative savings rate. People are living living one paycheck away from a bankruptcy. I mean, we don't have a lot of excess money.
Death. I don't know how you face your children at night if chronically you think that the world is going to fall apart.
It's Dr. Doom, not Dr. Death.
David, you get the final word, if you will.
Well, I think that the market is going to do, believe it or not, despite what your other guest says, I think the market's going to do very well this year because earnings are going to continue to grow and be consistently strong.
On that note, gentlemen, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
See you all soon. Coming up on